this was one of my first presentations on the Moors. Big man. And Brother Leon Muhammad invited me to the, in Brooklyn, to the center. And basically, I had done a presentation, in fact, this comes after. I had done a presentation on the Moors before that. And you can't understand the Crusades if you don't understand what happened with the Moors. So I backtracked. I was doing a presentation on the Moors. So these two brothers said, look, I want you to come and do something on the on the Crusades. And so we called it the precursor to Cristobal Colon. We should have seen them coming. Once the Crusades occurred, we should have seen Cristobal Colon coming because of what happened during the Crusades. And so we studied the Crusades. It was a 3-part series on the Crusades. And what we studied was, here you have the first Crusade. The mask of it was to get the Mamelukes, let's just call them Muslims, had penetrated into Turkey and had brought Islam there. It was also in what we today call Israel and that area there. Under the pretense of trying to get Jerusalem back. That's why what's happening today, when everyone's trying to move the capital of Israel to Jerusalem. See, all of this applies. All of this is very important for us to understand. It's all part of it. So under the guise of getting Jerusalem back to Christianity, the home of Jesus the Christ, they said, we're going to go on a crusade, a holy war. And so in 1096, Pope Urban called out and said, remember now, when you're dealing with Istanbul or Constantinople, you're dealing with today what we call Turkey or Normandy, the Latin states of Edessa, the Principality of Antioch, the County of Tripolis, headed towards the Kingdom of Jerusalem. That was the first crusade. Not successful. The second crusade, 1147 to 1149, 2 years, after 50 years, the Turks conquered Edessa. So the second crusade, Bernard of Clairvaux, King Louis VII of France, Emperor Conrad III of Germany, led into Asia Minor, and the Turks defeated them again. But that was the mask. They were really trying to get into the lands of African people. They were really doing what Tarif did by reconnoitering Spain. They were really reconnoitering. And the roads that they went to these places were the same roads that Africans took to get to Europe. So they didn't even pave new roads. They just went back over the same roads that Africans had carved getting into Europe. See, we have to understand these crusades because we're in the middle of one right now. It's called World War III because we're in a religious war right now. Christianity, Judaism, and Islam are at war. And what's interesting is that the religions are not at war. It is the fanatical form of every religion that's at war. The religions are not at war. The fanatics are at war. They're all crazy. And they're doing this all in the name of thievery. It has nothing to do with honestly believing that God told you to do this. Because all three religions came from the same place. All religions trace their ancestry back to Atonism, which is Judaism, Aminism, which is Christianity. And by the way, Christianity existed before Judaism. Mm-hmm. Judaism is going to come during the New Kingdom, which is Atonism. But Atonism came into existence because it broke away from Aminism, which was the original Amen priesthood, which is Christianity, or what we call in science pantheism. that there is one creator, and the creator exists in all things that exist. And Islam said, I'm going to take the best out of Judaism and the best out of Christianity, and that became Islam, which is not. It's just another form of the Ethiopian religion that was in the mountains of Ethiopia. He's focused on something else, I'm telling us. Really? So the Second Crusade. Okay, now we're going to go to the Third Crusade. The Third Crusade is 1189 to 1192. After 1187, Jerusalem was recaptured. Went after conquered, and then conquered much of Christian Holy Land, led by a brother, one of the baddest brothers on the planet. His name was Saladin. Google Saladin. They won't let you know he's black, but he's black, trust me. Because the busts of him, he clear black.
That was the leader of the Assassins?
That's what they called him.
Assassins.
Oh, no, that's a different group altogether. May have had the same name, but Saladin was a brother that was but he was a pious warrior. And so here you had King Frederick Barbarossa of Germany, King Philip II of Augustus of France, and King Richard I. This is King Richard the Lionheart. This is the crusade that you catch in Robin Hood. Okay, now what's interesting is that King Philip and King Richard, see, King Richard, his name was Richard Coeur de Lion, which is, he was French. See, you get the impression that Richard the Lionhearted, being in London and the King of England, he was French. And what happened historically is that word got to King Richard. This is what's going on in Robin Hood. That's why he's coming back. That's where he sees Robin Hood. King Richard hears that Philip is going to make a move on England. So he has to leave the crusade to get back to England to ward off his family member, Philip II, who's trying to move in on England.
Well, they're all related. All the royalty from Europe, they're all the same thing.
Yes. And all of them have coat of arms of black people.
Yeah.
All of them have coat of arms of black people.
Mm-hmm.
It's all there to be seen. You go into the book Golden Age, there's pages of coat of arms of the Moorish families. Mm-hmm. Charlotte Sophia. You see the king, you see what his name, Charles, right? Now, is his name Charles? Yeah. Philip. Okay? What did they name their second child, the daughter? Charlotte. Named after who? Charlotte Sophia. Who's Charlotte Sophia? She's a sister. The Queen of England is related to a black woman. Queen Victoria's grandmother was a black woman. Or great-grandmother, one of them, was a black woman. Charlotte Sophia. Don't believe me? Look it up.
Van Servan does a great story on that.
Yeah?
He claims when she was pregnant, well, anyway, she had the black baby, right? Yeah, and so the king asked the doctor when she was pregnant. She probably looked at the butler or whoever was, and that penetrated. And that is where she got the blackness from, and the king said it must have been a penetrating look.
Not just that, but that doctor must have been related to Donald Trump, because that's something he says. You see what
Prometeo Bay goes into that very well in his work.
Yes, and in that essay. And also Othello, the Children of Othello, his book, Children of Othello. Mm-hmm. There's also, if you're interested in a really interesting video on the Crusades, A&E did a 4-part series on the Crusades. Yeah, A&E. And I recommend that you get that. Because when they break the story of this down, wow, what a story. Okay, the Fourth Crusade, 1201 to 1204. Pope Innocent persuaded French crusaders bargained with Venetian merchants. Now here's the key. The Venetian merchants are basically what's going to bring the Italian and the Sicilian into civilization, into buildings. That's why they're into construction and into fashion. Combined forces of Crusaders and Venetians divided the Byzantine Empire, ruled it until 1261. There was economic and political expeditions. Venetians won out. The Christian Holy Land remained in the hands of Muslims. So they still ain't done nothing yet. Here's one Dr. Clarke always says the Europeans never want to talk about. The Children's Crusade. It was in 1212. Boys and girls, many of them less than 12 years of age. Two armies, French and German. None of them ever reached the Christian Holy Land. They died of hunger, cold, and other hardships. Some of them drowned in storms at sea, and those that were left were sold into enslavement. Children of France and Germany. But now you have the second wave. The Fifth Crusade was 1217, 1271. Not too important. Sixth Crusade was 1228 to 1229. Frederick II, the Holy Roman Empire, and the Seventh Crusade was Louis IX, which was Franco from 1248 to 1254, and the Eighth Crusade was Louis IX. It was 1270. They landed in Tunis. He was too old and ill, so he died in Carthage. Those were the Crusades. But remember, behind the Crusades was Europe exploring the world. That's what you got to keep in focus.
Yeah. Is that what the goal was?
That's what the goal was behind the people. The principalities, the leaders, really were using the Crusades to be able to return back over the path that Africans took to get to Europe. Europeans took those paths to get to the world. This is where you're going to have Marco Polo. This is where you're going to have all the explorations. So that by 1492, Prince Henry the Navigator and Portugal and Spain, you're going to have all of these different things going on. You're going to have the Netherlands, which is in Holland. I visited where the ports of those slave ships came in that Dr. Jeffries talks about. They're right there. So you have them there. And this is where they're going to explore the world. But it's the Africans that's going to teach them boat building, the compass, the astrolabe, how to get on the waters, how to navigate. Because until then, Europeans, the best they had were the Vikings. And even the Vikings were Scandinavian Africans, known as Skraelings. Get the book, The African Presence in Early Europe. Don't believe a word I say. Look at this. Look at the pictures of who the Vikings were. You'll see them. You'll see the pictures. I know my time is moving. Just wanted to introduce you to the Madonnas of Europe. Long before the white Madonna and Child, these were the Madonnas from Italy and Spain. Here's Our Lady of Czestochowa from Poland. Italy was called the Madre Mia the Black Bambino. Here is the throne of Aset with the king sitting on it. That's what the Pietà. I remember during
The Pope's headdress.
yes, absolutely. It's all there. And then here is the Waset, the was, the uas of the power of the shepherd's staff, which comes directly from the crook and flail of the pastor, the shepherd of the people. The crook is meant to keep all the sheep in line, and the flail keeps them all moving forward. The crook and flail, symbols of the shepherd. Here, let's look at Alexander Dumas, the author of The Three Musketeers. Here's the brother. Check him out. That brother got an afro. Look at him. He's there. That's his picture. Now, let me just go through this. This is Chevalier Saint George. Chevalier Saint George was the mightiest swordsman and violinist in Europe. You see, he's got the fence in his hand. He was elder to this next brother, who is the father of Alexander Dumas. This is Thomas Alexander Dumas, whose mother Marie was from Haiti, and his father was a nobleman from France, who went to Haiti, fell in love with Marie Dumas, married her, and Thomas Alexander Thomas was their child. Marie Dumas died. The father brings him back to France. He remarries Thomas. Check out the brother's afro. Gets upset with his father and renounces his father and keeps his mother's name. So that's why Dumas. Okay.
Now you say he was the Three Musketeers?
This was Thomas Alexander Dumas. This was father to. This man, Thomas Dumas' son, was Alexander Dumas. Now, two things I want to tell you about this. Number one is that if you remember in the opening scene of the Three Musketeers, there is a character known as D'Artagnan. D'Artagnan does battle with three swordsmen. Alexander Dumas wrote that in. Alexander Dumas was 4 years old when his father died. His father died, Thomas Dumas died at the age of 44. He was born to Thomas Dumas and his mother at the age of 40. He dies at 44. To honor his father Thomas Dumas was one of the most magnificent warriors of Europe, not to mention France. And there are stories where he would fight three swordsmen at one time. So to honor his father, he reenacted this story in the opening of the Three Musketeers. But D'Artagnan is Thomas Alexander Dumas. So if you get a chance, if you see the Three Musketeers again, or if you read the book, look at D'Artagnan. The second thing I want to tell you about Alexander Dumas is he wrote a book that a lot of people don't read and aren't aware of. He has another classic that's named after, that is titled Georges. And Georges is a story of a half African and half Frenchman, great swordsman, that is a combination of his father's story and Chevalier Saint Georges. Get that book, Georges, and read it. That's another classic, but we get caught up in The Man in the Iron Mask, you know, all great books. But Georges is another classic that nobody focuses on because why? Because then you'd have to ask yourself, why is this white man writing about a mixed child? And then you'd have to come to the realization that Alexander Dumas was black. Mixed, yes. And the story is about his father and Chevalier Saint Georges. And it's called Georges. When I taught the Moors, well, I called it the Africans in medieval Europe, that was the book I assigned to the class. I didn't assign them the Three Musketeers. I assigned them Georges. It's really a phenomenal book. Very interesting about the life of a mix. But you see, remember, to Europeans, there's no such thing as mixed. You black. So it's really a story about a black person. Although they're mixed, it's a story about a black person.
So if you subscribe to their definition.
Yes, absolutely. And that's what the story is. It's telling what you go through being that type of individual in French society. Now here is an actual silhouette portrait of Ludwig van Beethoven. They used to do silhouette. Okay, now I want you to focus on the brow ridge, the nasal index, and the prognathic jaw. because of Ludwig van Beethoven. Okay, that's a portrait. It's an engraving. But now let me show you another picture. That's something he sat for. His hair. Straight up now.
Curly fro.
That's it. Okay, let me show you another picture. This is Beethoven. Looks like anybody that would be outside of Beethoven's. There's a book called Beethoven's Hair. Back in those days, in the 1700s, they would, when you were laying in state, they would pluck out your hair. But for Beethoven didn't be as famous as he became, but he was a popular musician. They forbid anybody to take his hair. But somebody came in anyway and plucked his hair out, but somebody was coming in the room. This is what the book is about, Beethoven's, by Russell, something Russell. But the person that pulled it out became so concerned that he pulled too tight. And what happened was that not only did he pull the hair out, but he pulled out part of the skin of Beethoven's scalp. And that is what was studied. And you could trace his lineage back through that hair. Outside of Beethoven's hair in Bonn, Germany, see, his family left Moorish Spain and went to Amsterdam, where a lot of Jews and Moors went. Then they moved to Bonn, Germany. Then the father, Johannes Beethoven, because his name is Thoven Bey, B-E-Y. But what they did is they changed the Y to E, put the B in front of the Thoven. If your name is Bey or L, you're a Moor. So he then felt his son, Ludwig, named after the grandfather. Johannes is Beethoven's father. And the grandfather, Johannes Beethoven's father's name was Ludwig. The grandson, or Johannes' son's name, was Ludwig. He felt his son was a prophet. He wanted to have an audience with Mozart, Wolfgang Amadeus. So he moved his family to Vienna, Austria. They had the meeting, and he told Johannes and Ludwig, he said, "You are a great musician, but you're not a protege. A protege is a young genius." He said, "You're going to become a great musician." But what a lot of people don't understand is that Mozart's teacher was a black man named Suleiman, was a Moor. See, we have not been exposed to classical music. That's why I take exception when I hear black people say that classical music is white people music.
And it's not.
It's not.
Absolutely not. They could never do that. They don't have that kind of spirit.
Classical music came from Baroque in the 1600s, and the leading Baroquean or Baroque musician was Bach, Sebastian Bach. Sebastian Bach studied with black people, became Baroque. Baraka. Baroque. Out of Baroque came what we call classical music. Classical music is Baroque, it's just a different style. As I said, the piano, if you look at a grand piano, it's a harp turned sideways, encased in wood, that combines the African instruments known as the kalimba and the xylophone. Except instead of hitting the keys with sticks, you use the fingers, and instead of strumming the harp, the different digits hit various chords in the piano. The piano actually is a chordophone, but it's a chordophone and a percussion because you're hitting it makes it a percussion. But you can't call it a membranophone because it's not made from membrane. You see, so it's an interesting combination of instruments brought into Europe by Africans. But the point I want to make is a point I always make with children. When Ludwig, let me finish this story first. Outside of Ludwig van Beethoven's home in Bonn, Germany, And outside his home in Vienna, Austria, there's a sign. This sign says, Schwarzer Spanierhaus. Schwarzer, black, Spaniard, Spaniards, house, H-A-U-S. It means the black Spaniard's house. If you get that book, Beethoven's Hair, it shows you this sign. So I'm not emotional about this. I'm not making this stuff up. Get the book and you'll see it. I wish I thought I was going to say this to you today. I would have brought the book to show you. Schwarzer Spanierhaus, which means the black Spaniard's house. Okay? Now here's what I want to tell you about children.
Black from Spain.
Yeah, black from Spain. Because originally he was a Moor from Spain.
And they were kicked out.
And then, well, they left and kicked out because of the nature of what I'm going to show you next.
And that's Mozart?
Huh?
Is that Mozart? That sign is in Beethoven's house?
No, this is outside of Beethoven's house. Louis van Beethoven, in Bonn, Germany, and in Vienna. And if you get the book, Beethoven's Hair, they show you the sign where it says Schwarzer Spanierhaus. But here's what I want to tell you about children. Johannes was not a very nice person. And he lived vicariously through his son. And because of that, he put adult demands on a child. And when Ludwig van Beethoven would be playing the sheet music, Johannes in another room or somewhere in the house would hear that he was going off sheet music because his father was a musician, played for the church. So he knew sheet music. And he would come out and get mad at Ludwig and say, Ludwig, I told you, you play sheet music. And Ludwig would say, but I hear this music in my head. He said, I don't care what you hear in your head. You play the sheet music. There were times he would beat Ludwig because he would go off. And then Ludwig would go back to the sheet music and then go off his head. Father would come out, big thing. The reason why I say this to you is because this is something to do with education and my experience with children. Ludwig van Beethoven wrote most of the greatest pieces of music after he became totally deaf. He was deaf by 30. Most of his, like the Ninth Symphony, the one that's repeated throughout musical history, they got it in discotheque, they got it in rap, they got everything. The Ninth Symphony was written when Beethoven was deaf. Most of his greatest music was written after he was deaf. And the reason why is because the very nature, although Johannes didn't realize it, the nature of Beethoven's genius he had as a child because he had the music in the head. Had his father allowed Beethoven, Ludwig, to play his head, he would have been a protege. But because he beat him, he never was able to develop his genius until after his father was gone and he could do his own thing. So what I tell us as adults is we have to, in our own way, let our children express their genius. Stop trying to make them into who you perceive their genius should be. And that's how I work with my own children. That's how I work with the children in my classroom. There were things I had to get them to understand and learn, but I gave them a chance to express themselves, to search for their genius. I showed them how their genius could work, okay? Like as I look around this room and I'm looking at people, as I'm talking, you're nodding your head, okay? The people who are doing it are laughing. But you see, the thing is that to me that means that you are a rhythmic learner. So that you're like this, right?